Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100.
Or Mott's.
Flipping me off your countdown. Welcome to another Lost Signals episode and another AFI movie. Today we're doing number 72, The Shawshank Redemption.
That is.
Or Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption if you want to be pedantic. I'm Jonathan Ian Penzer, and putting the shank back in Shawshank, Scott Thurla.
Birdman of Alcatraz, baby.
He's getting busy living, Christopher Morgan.
I was flipping you all off, but not just you, Ian.
And he's getting busy dying, Stuart Mercy.
Good night, sweet world.
All right, so we're doing the shank. I'm giving the log line of sorts. Dufresne, Party of Two.
Yeah. Good one if you get that reference.
Wow. It's a real callback.
And Scott, it's on to you with the plot.
Certainly. So Tim Robbins / Andy Dufresne gets committed for murder, although he's actually innocent. So he goes to the Shawshank prison and sort of has to navigate the prison life. A lot of things happen. He becomes friendly with a prisoner named Red, played by Morgan Freeman, who gets him, like, smuggles some basic contraband here and there. And Andy Dufresne is a very smart man, very smart character, and sort of ingrains himself. He proves himself to the warden and starts doing his books because he was an accountant or a banker beforehand, and is able to sort of make life better for all the prisoners that he becomes friendly with in general, even though, of course, still facing hardships. But eventually, because he's a chess master, as the film points out, he essentially tunnels his way out over 20 years, 19 years, escapes the Shawshank, indicts the warden for basically money laundering, and sets his best friend, who's become his best friend, Red, up for life as well. So that's mostly it. Like, yes, there's a lot of, like, details here and there, but that's pretty much it. It's basically the Count of Monte Cristo, sort of, like, modernized to a degree.
Which they reference in the movie.
Yep, they absolutely do reference that, of course. Like, I don't see how you can make a prison movie like this in which you don't do that, Chris. But yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. And it's from 94, I believe, 92, something like that. So it's been a while. And yeah, they put on, it's actually a later addition to the AFI, which I think is a good choice on their part. And yeah, that's pretty much the plot. So if we're going to scores, it's a longer, it's 2.5 hours, maybe 2:20, something like that. But I think it's all cut up very nicely. I think there is no wasted time. There's no downtime. It all builds up. It's either focusing on the characters themselves or giving you information like exposition. Like, for example, a quick plot point is that a prisoner comes in like 15 years later and basically corroborates Dufresne's story that he's indeed innocent. Like, he knows that someone else killed Dufresne's wife and lover, and confirms that, and he gets murdered because of corruption as well. So, like, I'm just saying, like, I think the way it's paced is very, very, very well done. I don't think there's, like, a dull or, like, a lull or anything like that in the plot. So I think it's fucking solid as hell. I'm looking at a 3 unless anybody else has any arguments to say something below that, but that's what my score is for now. So, good, boys.
I mean, I've always loved this movie. I completely agree. Like, watching, I've probably seen this movie 10 times, and it's almost 2.5 hours long. It doesn't feel that long or anywhere near that. It's really well paced. It's a really great movie, and it kind of, like, picks up momentum even towards the end.
Yep.
Which is great. The whole ending with Tim Robbins crawling out a sewer drain, 500 yards of phallus, whatever Morgan Freeman says.
A river of shit or something like that.
It's just a really well paced and well done plot. Stuff to keep your interest at every given point in it. I don't think there's really a wasted scene. And I'm going to give it a 3, I think, unless somebody convinces me differently.
No, I'm going to give it a 3. I've seen this film twice. This is the second, maybe third time I've saw the film in its entirety. I've seen bits and pieces of it here because, quite frankly, this film is exhausting. Like it's an emotional roller coaster. I was like,
It can be.
I was bracing for it, and then I'm like, oh, this is not bad. I can handle this. And then James Whitmore, Brooke hits the screen with the bird, and it all came back to me, and I was a wreck. I went after I watched it. I went over Scott's house and hung out with those guys in the patio, and I was just a wreck when I got there. So,
Yes,
but the thing is,
It didn't look well.
But my whole point is,
look a little bit like Brooks coming out of prison.
that's what I felt like. No, but it is an extremely well-paced movie. It's got a hell of a lot of heart. I look forward to talking about themes. So I'm just going to give it a 3 and pass the buck.
I'm just going to say one thing, that I think the plot is actually Red meets a legendary figure in Eddie Dufresne. It inspires hope in him, and for when he gets out to choose life. Because I actually think that Red's the main character of this work. But we'll get to that argument in protagonist. But I think otherwise, yeah, there's nothing. I think this is a wonderful film, and I'm giving it a 3.
Regardless of giving a 3 to 5. Yep.
Okay, Mr. Hermosi, tell us about the themes. Don't do crime.
Just don't do the crime. Can't do the time. Or be the only, or sadly be the only innocent person in Shawshank.
They're all innocent.
Or the only guilty person in Shawshank. That is, as Morgan Freeman. But yeah, there is this theme of kind of how prison is this whole, different world, how corrupt the system is, theoretically both in like the judicial system and in the once you get into prison, right? Prisoners being treated unfairly, and Tim Robbins' character Andy Dufresne being treated unfairly in terms of his kind of rushed judgment that he got because he was the most obvious perpetrator of the crime that was committed. There's this like real theme of like kind of one hand washes the other that goes through. As long as you play ball, we'll give you the little things that you care about. Like that's how Andy is able to kind of make life a little bit better for the people on the inside, is he's got a skill that the people in charge can exploit. But the moment that he kind of tries to speak up against the injustices that he's seeing, he gets slapped down, put in solitary, and which eventually drives him to make his great escape. There's a lot going on with like social patterns between people who are being kept prisoner, like the people that are inside developing their own kind of system as they're able to, within, like Red gets people what they need as long as he gets compensated for it. Andy's kind of feels this weird, like, because he's smart, he can help people out.
Ostensibly, he's the most educated prisoner there, so therefore, like, yeah, exactly, good. But it does really. I guess it's mostly Andy and Red that it shows us about, and Brooks to kind of an extent, but like it shows like kind of the niches that people fill within a society when you have a bunch of people thrown together for whatever reasons, in this case because they're all convicts. So it's really interesting to see that society kind of develop, or see Andy take his place within this society that has already developed within those walls, and like learn kind of his place and fight to defend himself and make the right kind of friendships that will help protect him. Like he does a favor for what's his face, the captain of the guard. Clancy Brown is the actor's
Clancy.
name.
Byron Hadley, I think is his name.
Sure.
He does a favor for him that ultimately protects him from people that are, assaulting him, sexually assaulting him in the prison. So, it is really interesting to see like a lot of these things come up. I'm sure you guys have your own interesting takes on the themes, but that's kind of the first things that I thought of when going into this.
Well, if you want, I want to give some historical context to this. This was released in '94, and it is regarded as like a classic nowadays, but there's actually a lot of pushback on it when it first came out, because we had prior Reagan, and in UK we had Thatcher, which had very negative, which demonized a lot of this. But you also had the new left under Clinton, like who, terms like super predators, the '94 crime bill, things like that, which the idea of humanizing prisoners, which this film did, while the greater government was attempting to demonize them and increase punishments, was a big kerfuffle among society, because they have been ingrained in mind that these are bad people deserving what they get. And I also want to say that it's actually a fairly realistic depiction of my experiences. And I actually deframed myself a little bit, because I taught GED, and I actually got the halfway house I was in new books. So I didn't even no intent. It just turns out that I'm a little bit different in me, or so I like to think. Anyway, Chris.
Yeah. Let me just channel Bernie. Prison reform. I think one of the things that hits me the most, and it's one of the biggest, I'm not going to go on a rant like I did last week. I already did that.
All the rants you want, buddy.
I went, all right,
Fine.
fuck it. The thing is that this film points out really, really well something that has been a problem, in that, last week I said it with soldiers about being able to reacclimate into society. Here, they're asking Morgan Freeman, have you been reformed? I'm like, you're asking somebody based upon what scale? Like, all right, but you have Brooke that gets out of jail, and he can't live with, he doesn't know life outside the prison. Nobody helps him. He's thrown into this little hotel room. And
if you don't have someone to pick you up, they give you a bus ticket, and good luck.
And that's really prevalent in the society. So when we hear all this stuff, and you hear about prison reform, there's a lot of reacclimation. It's just like these things are supposed to be kind of reform, not just punishment. And everybody, whether it's Reagan or Thatcher or Clinton or Biden or who else? Name a neocon or a neoliberal. And the fact of the matter is, it's just like, what's important is like, how do we go on a society? How do we talk about human beings and humans? It's like the value of life when people who do their time come back, and as you said, Ian, and you have probably more to say on this, know better about this than I do. Nobody picks you up. You're kind of left on your own, and then you get back into society, and you're asked, like, always, this thing always follows you. Nobody really, you're lucky if somebody gives you a chance, and it's just like, it's this really pointed out very simply what the fuck, that our society was not then, and it is sure shit worse now about what happens when people have done their time and are trying to reintegrate into society, and it's really fucked up.
Well, I have two quick stories, if you don't mind.
Please.
A guy went in and he spent 12 years in prison, carjacking when he was, I think, around 18 or so. He just got out to a halfway house, so he'd been inside for 12 years. You're allowed to go out supervise shopping. They went to a Best Buy after 12 years in prison, and he had to leave the store and cried because technology had sped so much in his time inside that he didn't even recognize the world he had re-entered. And then about the Reagan Society, and this guy, a very, very smart guy, he's like was in there for drugs, and said, "Well, I'm going to go back home. When I release, I'm going to go right back to my neighborhood, and I'm going to try to make it, but no one's going to hire me. Guys can come by, hand me a brick of dope, and say, oh, this is on me. Make some money. You need it. Come back when you need some more." And he's like, "I'm going to be right back in the cycle." And that's the reality of what it is, whether it's you're either back in the neighborhood that caused you this, or you completely unacclimated to society. So,
yeah, I mean, I wanted to let you speak first because, again, you have first-hand experience. But like, you guys covered most of it. Like, I'm certainly giving themes a 1 because I think it handles all that stuff like in a subtle, like without again being like in your face about it. Like, yes, the message is clear, but it's not it's not again punching you in the face all the time about it. It naturally evolves from the story and from the characters. I think that's an important reason, like one of the reasons perhaps that they put it on the AFI because it addresses all that stuff. And yeah, certainly like there's been some small maybe progress, but there's a lot of work to be done even within it. But
I was just about to say, isn't it great that since this movie came out, it's no longer pertinent to our society, that we have moved on?
No, it's possibly more important than ever.
Isn't it worse now?
For sure.
Well,
Aren't things worse than ever?
I do have one lesson to say.
And in the 40s?
Equate it to slavery, the work a lot of them do. I mean, they banned a lot of illegal immigrants from picking the fields in North Southern, and they made prisoners go out and do it instead. So that kind of corporatization of prisons is still a big problem. And I don't necessarily maybe want to equate to slavery, more so living in a military dictatorship. Like what I think people fear North Korea is like living in, is what it's like to actually be in there. But that's just me.
Certainly, and that isn't any kind of fun, of course. Like but I'm saying like
make your fun.
But I mean, the movie addresses that too. Like you do what you can to occupy your time because you're in this position, and again, like you get caught within the wheels and the cogs of the system, and there's just no escaping it for the most part. But all I'm saying is like I think the movie does a good job. The script does a pretty damn good job of certainly showcasing that without like without overbearing, being overbearing about it. But it's there throughout, and yeah, it's an important thing to consider still because you're right. Like there's still, it's not at a great spot right now, certainly, and there's certainly much improvement that could be done there. But I'm saying like even with given it's a time period piece, even with all that, it still manages to encapsulate all these
time
things.
period piece, though it was directly addressing the system in the 80s, which hasn't done much.
I mean, it's using it as an analog for sure, but I'm saying it's still relative. I guess is my point here.
Yeah, but the thing, I think we have a theme going this year is older movies that are unfortunately still way too relevant, if not more so today. And it seems this seems to be something we've brought up.
Certainly, we've
several reviews in the last couple months.
We've encountered a number of those things, and yeah, I think like maybe it's certainly an indictment, maybe on our society itself, but that doesn't in no way. In fact, maybe it's even more of a highlight upon the themes of these works because of that very reason. So,
yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on themes?
I'm gonna give it a 1.
1 for me.
I'm giving
very
it a
strong.
1. Chris, on to antagonist. Tell me about the super predators.
The prison system. I mean, if they were to make Manifest, and actually I think they do a really good job manifesting the warden and Clancy Brown, who's always amazing. And the thing that's great about their characters is they're presented as mustache twirling villains. But then they show some humanity, and then they show some genuine caring in their quid pro quo. But at the end of the day,
they twirl their mustache again.
But the thing is, by the time they come back into that is one of the few things that like I really forgot was like, how do we end up hitting these people again? And then things start to unwind, like you said, with the slave labor analogy. The payola well, don't get your guys to do this because I need this work. Here's a pie plus money. And you see a lot of quid pro quo and a lot of politics and so forth. And none of it really comes as a surprise until they, as Steve, as you said, they give it reason to twirl the mustaches when somebody could come and exonerate Dufresne and the prison warden and Clancy Brown. Prince Ward hasn't killed, and Clancy Brown does the killing. And this is a man who's in there like he's in and out of prisons just for
like basically
various stuff. Yeah, there's nothing that, but just the fact that they were going to take their asset away from it.
It's just about to retire with his GED.
Yeah, he was just about to retire with his GED and his little rowboat live forever. But the thing is that the thing that's interesting about it is it's actually they make it more petty in a way that like, well, they're going to kill this one person because in trying to help out his fellow inmates, Dufresne made life easier on the warden and Clancy Brown.
They want to continue the corruption, Chris. They don't want to like.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's just like okay, there's this entitlement where like, well, we can't let this go. We got this good thing going. We tried to break this guy, and hey, guess what? He's been doing us a favor. So yes, Steve, they do turn him back into mustache twirling, but it's a different kind of mustache, a different kind of twirl. And by the time we get there,
I really like that.
Thank you. But by the time we get there, there's been some depth of character. There's been some situation.
Yes.
I'm thinking back on this. I cannot believe this film is only 2 hours and 22 minutes.
You got yourself a new T-shirt there, but I think that you actually have to have them mustache twirling, considering the era that this was born in.
Yeah, I think
the idea is that you went into this film going, the prisoners are bad guys, the cops are good guys. So you actually need, and then they did a good job of showing like some COs give a damn, and that's true. Some COs are roided out assholes. That's very true. But not that they showed that in here. But the idea is that, but you need those villains that everyone despises in order to change the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of the ways. Like, it's not funny, but like darkly shown that the warden and so forth, like the COs, like are more, if not more criminal than the actual prisoners, certainly versus
But also, I think the important thing is to show the hypocrisy of the establishment. There.
Yes, right. Exactly.
You have someone throwing down the Bible, but he's committing sins left and right.
Yeah. I mean, so like that basically they're the face of like the corrupt system for sure, and I think that works really well because like that way they have you can have a character unto itself to sort of root against and like see the juxtaposition there. And I think the actors themselves like played it really well, like pretty solid. It all works. And yeah, I'm going to give it a 1 on that front because it's effective and overall to the overarching again themes and message and plot that we just talked about of the story itself. So
yeah, I mean that's the real undertone of this movie is that you can be a violent criminal basically as long as you're doing it for the ones in power, like for the government, that is, and you see that a decent amount in kind of subversive media, whatever. But like this is a very good example of it being done really well, where you can see how, everybody is a human being, and you get to see that they're human beings, but also you can see how shitty human beings can be, and it doesn't matter what side of the law you're on. There is a bunch of shitty human beings on both sides of the law, right? Like. And specifically, when you're given free reign to take advantage of a position of power, it shows just how shitty people can be, and I think that's shown really well in this film. So I'm going to give it a 1 for antagonist. Yeah, the warden, the guard played by Clancy Brown, both really good personifications of that system. Exactly. And I think that's really well done. So that's a 1 for me.
All right, I'm on to protagonist. And although I love Andy Dufresne, even though maybe a little bit of a Gary Stu here and there.
Yeah.
I think that Red is actually the heart and soul of this work, and not just because it's Morgan Freeman and his docile
His
tones.
soothing voice.
I actually think he
I'll
has
sit
one
try.
of the best arcs in this work, and he's also the narrator and telling the story.
True, yeah.
And
sure.
I feel that, like, if it wasn't actually, like, don't get me wrong, who does Tim Robbins does a fantastic job in this. But Morgan Freeman, this wouldn't be the same movie without him in that role,
Certainly, I agree.
and the emotional weight he carried for this. So I'm going to give Morgan Freeman a 1, and if you maybe Tim Robbins the secondary protagonist, but I think it's the yes.
You guys go ahead.
No, I was going to back up your argument because the only person who doesn't narrate is Brooks. When Brooke gets out of prison, he narrates his own story. Otherwise,
Kind
it
of.
is but he does. He it's his internal monologue, and the only time we really get Andy Dufresne's personal monologue is when he's talking to, like, Red in a letter or so forth. So I think, and I'm just gonna say, to back up your point, I think if you go by just the the narrator or the oh Christ, I'm forgetting the book. Whatever. Point is, I agree with you. I think it is definitely Morgan Freeman. I mean, you would definitely count Tim Robbins as a secondary protagonist, but Morgan Freeman is definitely.
Yeah. Once again, we fall into the same thing that we've seen before. This is a story about Red telling a story about his friend. And you know Andy through Red, right? Like this story is about Red telling a story. And it really does show I think the important thing in this is how Andy changes Red's life. It's not about how Andy's life,
So the
changes.
redemption isn't Andy's; it's Red's redemption.
Right.
I think it's both, but go on.
I don't know. I don't know even if it's it's yeah. I think they both save each other to an extent, for sure. But it's more of like a humble brag on Red's part and a like, here's how Andy saved my life as well. Like, like you know the story of Andy through Red in this.
Yeah, but go on.
So I mean that's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna back you up. I think that Red is the protagonist. Andy is a protagonist of Red's story for sure, but Red's story is one story removed from the story that we're watching, right?
But as a chess player, Andy's playing the long game. So Andy, in a sense, except for when he finds out that there is a witness to the fact that he did not kill his wife, Andy kind of has a good idea and learns how to play the game, where Red is just kind of like, so I think the redemption, I guess there's a Red Dead Redemption thing in here somewhere. But no, I just wanted to build off
Red Dead Shawshank Redemption.
Red Dead Shawshank Redemption. But no, Steve-O, you got me thinking about that yeah, it is because Andy does play the long game. I really do think in a lot of ways it is the prison, is the other people, but it's definitely Red's redemption over Andy.
I mean, I think it's both. Like maybe like a 60-40. I agree. Like it's Red's story, right, about Andy, but I think that means like he's, because of the way it's unfolds, he's featured enough in it that you can give them both credit. I'm lumping them both in protagonists and giving them both a very strong one. But certainly I agree that Morgan Freeman's as Red is a little bit above that because he's like the center stone of it, in which Andy is an important part of it, but it's him telling you, right, about, as you said, Tivo, like about Andy, like the first time I saw him and this and that, right? So like I think it's closely related, like I don't know, to use a quick physics analogy, I guess, like a 2-star system in a sense. But I still think I'm going to give them both credit in that sense and give them a 1. But I'm officially putting Andy / Tim Robbins himself in protagonist territory. So
let me put it this way: I don't know how trustworthy of a narrator Red is, but I know Red at the end of this movie. I don't know if I know Andy.
Hmm.
I assume I do. I assume Red's a trustworthy narrator, but I know for sure that I know Red at the end of this movie.
I get what you
I
mean,
like
but
that a lot, actually.
I'm not sure if I know who Andy is, what his deal is. Yeah, no, he can still be a protagonist for you, but I think that we're closer to the metal on Red, if that phrase makes sense.
no, I
to
get what
guys.
you
Like,
mean.
know what
I just yes, certainly.
100%, Steve.
see it.
100%.
But I'm saying I think to me at least Andy's closer than not to maybe to you guys, but it sort of is moot in a sense because I'm giving it a 1 either way.
Sure.
That's the way I cut it up. But I do like that angle, but that's the way I view it as well.
All right. Well, if it's ones all around, moving on to supporting characters, tell us about Andy Dufresne.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to because I just explained to you. But I mean, like probably like I'm sorry, Chris, since it's on me first. Like I think Brooks, of course, is a very important side character because of the way his little like his side story unfolds and what it means to the themes and so forth. But I still think I can't. Sorry, Steve-O, you have the cast list I think in front of you.
Sure.
Who's their tall? Like he's another sort of in their cadre. He's a
Haywood?
tall. Yeah, Haywood. Yes.
William
Right.
Sadler.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think he's like maybe like one of the most important side characters, and you might say like Clancy, but we already put him into antagonist, but like just a little cadre, and like even like expanding beyond that, even what's his name, Jimmy or whatever, Billy, the little
Tommy.
Tommy, yeah, the cocksure kid who comes in and like actually can exonerate Andy Dufresne. And then, of course,
And do a hell of an Elvis.
yeah.
He has a wild arc too, but by the way, for being on screen for like 15 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah, in my mind, it's funny, Steve. Like in my mind, he was in the movie longer, and like he's not actually in it all that much. He just serves that point, like basically to, again, if we can indeed, as an audience, rely upon his character's, his evidence that exonerate. Again, it proves Andy innocent, like beyond a doubt, and that's why they feel like they have to remove him. So I'm just saying, like I think it does a good job of like Brooks being like the heart and soul of the secondary characters. I think again, like exemplifying like that mindset, right? Like you said, Chris, he cannot in fact reintegrate into society because he's been stuck in this situation so long, and he comes to a tragic end because he feels there's no other option for him. And yeah, it's bittersweet. And again, like that's extended in a sense, like that sort of ripples out into the other inmates, at least their close circle of friends who become friends or become, I guess, compadres, if you will, while they're in Shawshank. So yeah, I think everyone does a good job. While there might not be any like number one standout, I think they all collectively serve that point together in the narrative. So
the world is really well built.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all.
Again, it's just like the whole point you're making. I'm sorry, Ian. I still can't believe this movie's only 220. Go on, Ian. I'm sorry.
I taught GD. I teach nowadays. Actually, one of the biggest things I learned while teaching GD in prison is that half my job was not just half my job was informing them. The other half was convincing them that they could actually do it. Because their entire lives, I heard some stories like they're shit on. The teachers who said you can't do this, parents who said you're an idiot. So half my job was no, you can do this, and I actually think they show that. Very, very well. Not only to show Andy's humanity, but an actual realistic problem with getting people education in our society of the bad influences around them and having a little bit of faith in them. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, as far as supporting characters go, it's a fairly short list in this movie. Honestly, much smaller cast list.
It
than
seems
I
like on the surface, it seems like it would be bigger than you think, but yeah, good.
But in terms of that, I mean, you guys have mentioned pretty much everybody I was going to mention, and I think they all do a good job. Actually, I liked Haywood, but he was like one of the more, like he was like the third supporting.
Yeah, he's more in the background for sure, but I still think he's an important part of their dynamic. Is all I wanted to mention. So,
also,
well, yeah, I mean, I think they all do a good job. The Brooks storyline is crazy. The Tommy storyline is actually pretty wild too. Like that, there's a lot of like character growth that goes into his character in a very short amount of time.
Yeah,
which is
definitely
wild, and like it makes his end, his ultimate deaths really impactful when it finally ends up happening. And yeah, like I think the biggest thing is like Haywood doesn't really get that closure that the other two characters
Yeah, I
really
think
do
that's a
get,
good
you know?
point. That's true.
You don't really know what happens to him, but like I think that the supporting characters are great in this. I think they're super important, and you know, even just the scene where he's gets all the prisoners that got on the roof duty, like beers, and they're all just sitting around. Like that's a great scene. You know,
Yep.
like just the visual of it. Darabont, who directed this, does a great job. Like, capturing that in a very short amount of time. I think he does, like you said, Chris. It's surprising that this is only 2 hours 20 long, but I think he does an amazing job capturing a lot with a little amount of screen time for that. And you know, I have to give credit to the
Yeah,
film
man.
for that. So I'm gonna give one to supporting for sure.
Also, Richie April's in this from The Sopranos. If any of you are
That's
familiar,
right.
never mind. Anyway,
Hold on a
Steve,
second. I just want to mention one person we all forgot. Brooks Crow Jake. I loved that bird. Okay. I'm
Yes,
giving
yes,
it.
all
I'm
right.
giving this a 1.
The bird gets a 1 too,
Just
Chris.
for the
All right.
crow.
well, tell us about the crow's caulking and dialogue, Siva.
That crow. All right, I'm
Caw.
sorry. I'm cacaw. I am always very enthralled by the dialogue of this movie. I love it. I love you know, Morgan Freeman's almost dialogue with him, like with the audience. You know, like I guess that's more monologue, which I'm gonna throw into that.
It's as if he's writing you a letter from prison.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, aside from that, that doesn't even matter because the dialogue between characters flows so quickly and so like fluidly between them, which is part of what makes the plot flow so well, I think. And there are moments where it's like really elevated. I don't mean that in like it's really good. I mean that like in that the language is really elevated, and there are moments where it's like really down in the dirt, and like it mixes and combines those really well throughout the movie, and I think that's an important part of why this is good. Like it feels real, but it also gets to bigger things and bigger points, like you know, higher points than what they're actually saying. You know, the dialogue allows you to understand a higher philosophy than what is at base level of what they're saying, and like that's always a good thing. And I think this movie does a really good job of that. That's why it's, I think, on the AFI, and I have to give it full marks for that.
Yeah, I mostly agree. So I want to say something. Like it's sparse. It's not maybe the word I want, but when I want to say it's sparse but impactful. Certainly, I think it's impactful. But I think maybe you did a good job there, Steve, was saying like where it needs to be like quote unquote elevated. It is that, and when the service, it would be better served when it like is below that than it does that well at the same time. So yeah, I mean I'm basically backing you up. I don't have much more to add. I'm certainly not going to nitpick anything because I think it all works. And yeah, the casting is fucking amazing. So like I think that adds a lot to it just in general for sure as well. So
It's
good.
also super quotable, might I add.
Yeah,
like,
that is true. Sure.
which
Absolutely.
like usually gives me an extra couple points in dialogue. Anyway,
No, I
go
feel
on.
you. I feel you. No, I mean, I think that's true. Like, I think we'll throw that into the mix. Just all that is evidence to. I'm certainly giving maybe like a second or third like strongest point of the film, but I'm still giving it obviously a 1. So.
I have nothing to add.
You
Yeah,
guys
good.
covered everything.
All right.
I always say I've used the biting down if you get stabbed in the head line quite a bit in my time.
I've used the or am I obtuse line.
Chris, are you obtuse? And well, what's the style of this work?
Obtuseness is in the eye of the beholder. And the style of this work is a masterclass in pacing. Without question, this should be anybody who's a director, film editor, writer, anything you have to do with pacing, this film is a masterclass of it. I mean, listen to all the characters we talk about, how well we got to know the oh Christ, the Elvis guy, the GE,
Brooks.
no, the GED guy.
Tommy, the
Oh,
Elvis
Tommy.
guy.
Yeah. Look how well we know Brooks.
It's
Adam
Elvis,
Sandler.
yeah.
I mean, Adam Sandler. Shit. William Sadler's character.
Adam Sandler's in this movie?
Fuck
What
no.
is happening?
No, what I'm saying. No, what I'm saying
Chris
is
is having a stroke.
it's an incredibly well-rounded cast, and most of the characters are three-dimensional. They're not just background characters, and there is an awful lot of character development, for a lot of characters in a 2-hour and 22-minute movie. And in that 2-hour 22 minutes does include, like, I think a 4-minute credit at least. So what I'm saying is, on top of everything, because the film is like beautifully shot, you know, I can go on about, I'll let you guys carry it on, but the thing that has stuck out watching the film, because a lot of times you'll watch a film and you'll be like, oh my God, how long's left in it? And I got to a point and I paused and I'm like, holy shit, I'm over halfway through this thing already. You know, it's just absolutely positively a masterclass in pacing. This goes to show you, you can tell a complicated story. You can tell many complicated stories, many human stories with many characters in a reasonable amount of time. So the style on that basis alone is getting, you know, a very strong one for me.
No, sorry. This will be. Okay.
I just want to make a quick mention
Yeah.
that Steve-O, your gaze into the distance matched Morgan Freeman's gaze into the distance.
Yeah, for watching this, it was amazing.
You look over-
But yeah, I mean, everything you said, Chris, of course, I agree with. But I was going to like talk a little more about the actual cinematography, which is also fantastic unto itself. Like from the opening shot to the ending shot, it's perfectly framed. It's blocked amazingly. Like what needs to be claustrophobic, it is. What needs to be a little bit open, it is. And I'll leave even the soundtrack to you guys. But yeah, just the DP, like Darabont and whoever he had shooting it, it's top notch from back to front. So on top of what you said, Chris, I'll add that and I'll give it a very strong one. And go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna talk about the score. I think that the music was amazing, and more so that I just had to look it up, which is why I was gazing into Morgan Freeman's eyes. But the Wikipedia article about it is is great. I'm just going to read the first part of it. The film's score was composed by Thomas Newman. He felt that it already elicited such strong emotions without music that he found it difficult to compose one that would elevate scenes without distracting from them. The piece Shawshank Redemption plays during Andy's escape from Shawshank and originally had a 3-note motif, but Darabont felt it had too much of a triumphal flourish and asked that it be toned down to a single-note motif. So like they're like really interesting stuff about that too. Like I love that the composer was like, this is already really emotional. I don't know what I can do to like make it more emotional with music.
Sure.
Well, I think the sparseness of the soundtrack worked in its favor.
I agree with that.
When they played the music through the speaker system, because then you don't notice like the kind of sort of absence of music, and then all of a sudden you actually get it's an emotional depth that when style and themes merge.
Yeah,
really well.
it's precision struck in there, and it's very very effective. For sure.
It is amazing, but like also the you know that as a musical piece stuck in there is really powerful. But the score itself is really good too. Just like that, you know, as I mentioned, the scene where he's escaping. There's the opening music that comes in like on that overhead shot, which is an incredible shot, like with all the prisoners going to meet the bus coming in. Like that is awesome, and there's like really great moments of that like brilliant cinematography that come into this film that you can see. Anyway.
And I just to say, period-wise, I think that the setting looked great.
Yep,
and
definitely. Good call.
Outfits and all that. Hey, so that's one's
I
all
just
around.
Say one more thing. Yeah, definitely one's all around. The when Andy escaped, before he escaped, he tells Red where to go find this rock, you know, by this tree. And what is it, like a year?
There's no earthly reason to be there.
Is it a year or two later? A year or two later?
Something like that. Yeah, within 2 years.
Like 5 years later after he says that.
I think it's a little less.
I think it's a wide margin.
It can't be because he's still working on his fucking boat, and it can't be too long.
No,
because
I think he's like just fucking working on that same spot in the boat for like 5 fucking years. To be honest,
his first parole hearing was in 47, and he gets out at 67. So, I just told very cynically. I turned to Beth. I'm like, if that were nowadays, that tree wouldn't be there. It'd be a McMansion.
Yeah, that's true.
I was like, they're gonna put like a Krausers there or something like that.
Yeah. Roadway through it, yeah.
Anyway, I'm on to recommendations, and yes, I think that sadly, it's still very pertinent to the situation at hand, and I think that a society is judged on how it treats its meekest and prisoners in a lot of sense, especially since this doesn't really touch it. The movie doesn't touch on it, but it's real life. Is that prisons are now the mental health wards or asylums, because they got rid of those and they just shove mentally ill people in prisons. That prison reform is an important thing. I think this movie highlights very well the humanization of people, and that, people do shitty things in life, but there's so many questions to ask about humanity, and I think this does a great job.
Yeah, I mean, certainly second that. I think it should be higher on the list is the only thing I was going to add. I'll do the right thing. I'll a couple other things that we discussed that are in the same sort of general umbrella. But yeah, I certainly recommend Shawshank. This is probably my 5th time seeing it all the way through. And like you said, it still stands as well as it ever did. In fact, maybe unfortunately, like it's more relevant than ever, but that in no way means it's not a great film and is important viewing. So.
Yeah, I think this absolutely deserves to be on the AFI. It's like easily the best prison film I guess I've ever seen. Like if we're talking about like prison reform or just a film about anyone in prison, easily on that list. And one of the better films that I've, better done films that I've ever seen just in general.
Yeah.
I really love this movie. I've seen it a bunch of times, and it has, it never ceases to
TNT marathon
amaze me how good it is. Yeah,
it's good every time.
So I got to give it full marks and give it the recommend. Yeah,
I highly recommend it. You guys basically said everything.
I also recommend Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption from different seasons by Stephen King. I think it's actually one of the most faithful adaptations I've seen in a movie to the story.
Okay.
In fact, they even Red is an Irish guy in the that's his name is Red, and they even referenced why are you named Red? Probably Irish. I thought that was a nice little touch to the
little kind of like
readers.
inclusion.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect 10 film. Do you all agree with that?
I think
Yes.
I do at this point. Yes, I do.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that I would say I definitely will give it a 10 in my own mind as well as on paper.
Right. Got you.
All right. Well, I'm Jonathan Manzer, and I'm going to reference Puff Puff Pass here. Back when my stoner days. We're going to watch The Shank with Scott
I'll
Thurlow.
have to go dig a wall out of my own room. See you next time.
Stephen Ramosi.
Yeah, I'm going to go put a Cardi B poster up on my wall.
Is she the modern Rita Hayworth?
I think so.
Christopher Morgan.
Peace and long life.
We'll see you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.